And so when we think about self and collective care, I think about the honeybees a lot because nothing they do is separate from the collective. All of it is to benefit the collective. So there may be individual practices like body work that I get or energy work that is for me and to regulate my nervous system. And there's going to be an impact if I have a regulated or dysregulated nervous system. Well, that will affect the collective, my community, people I'm in relationship with. And so to me, self and collective care are intertwined. And I don't know how to see them as separate because I think what we do for ourselves to find center, to ground, to heal, whatever words people might want to use or however they might describe this, that is not in isolation because we are not in isolation. We are part of that hive, right? We are part of that larger collective now, right? In real time, this conversation. And I think about the past and lineage and also the future as well.
Welcome to the Mindful Rebel podcast, your refuge for personal growth. We're all on a journey to reconnect and nurture the most authentic parts of ourselves. And in this podcast, we explore how these modern day rebels are using mindfulness to transform themselves and the world around them. Each episode will dive deep into personal interviews with social impact healers, teachers, creatives, and leaders. Through their stories and insights, you'll engage with powerful teachings to spark your mind, prompts to ignite your reflection, and techniques to integrate wisdom into your daily lives. Make sure you like, subscribe, review, and share this podcast while joining us at the intersection of mindfulness and social change that challenges the status quo, awakens our collective wisdom, and creates a world with peace, clarity, and freedom. All right, everyone, welcome to the Mindful Rebel podcast. It has been a minute for a new episode, but you know, when Michelle reaches out, we're going to talk and we're going to have a new episode drop. So, Michelle, thank you for hopping in, for being open to be in conversation and community. I already know this is going to be a dope convo. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for creating time and space to be in conversation.
Thank you for being in community with me and hosting this podcast and for the magic you create in the world. And I'm excited to see where we go.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it too. It's been a pleasure just being in community with you a little closer over the last couple of months with the energy and sound healing training. I hope that was a great experience for you and that you there was something that is now informing your journey. You've been doing a lot of amazing work. Like, you're not new to this. Like, I think about my first time being sort of introduced to your work. I want to say with Skill in Action. And I think ever since then, and we all know, I think everybody who's probably listening to the podcast know, like, Skill in Action feels like it's a mandatory read in any sort of training.
Yeah.
And so, and just knowing that the books that you've birthed since then, even now down to the Wisdom of the Hive, just thank you for putting pen to paper and putting your wisdom in such a digestible way for folks to be able to sort of grow in a mindful, intentional, and thought-provoking way. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And the sound healing experience with you and Doc, or I'm sure people on this podcast know who that is, Tamisha Ponder, Dr. Tamisha Ponder. That was a wonderful experience. And I just ordered about $500 worth of other sound healing instruments, tools this morning to add to my collection because I have an event coming up on August 1st. So I'm so glad that the stars aligned and my schedule aligned for me to be in community with y'all in that deep dive. And so grateful for your teachings.
Thank you. That means I'm receiving that. Thank you. As I like to start the podcast, I always, I'm a nerd. You probably can see in the background. I love, superheroes, comics. I always like to say or ask folks, like, what's their superhero origin story? Like, what brought you to the path of the healing work that you do in community? I feel like there's always sort of this sort of intrinsic pull towards healing for folks that that are engaging in the work. And I'm just very curious, like, what brought you to this work based on the work that you do? I see a little fur baby in the background.
Yes, Jasper is like on cue. I know the answer to that. That's so funny that he hopped up right then in response to healing because his name is Jasper. He is a healer and grounded. If folks know about the healing properties of the crystal, the stone Jasper. It's so interesting that you started with this question because I'm working on another book that's due on August 1st. And it is all about protection practices, how to protect and sustain our energy. And so the chapter, the computer was open to it right before I logged on with you, is about archetypes. There are all these different explorations around what or who we might call on to protect our energy. And I was just reading chapter 4 about archetypes. And the first archetype that I present in that chapter is the primordial mother. And so if I think about my healing journey, I will call my mother, Clara, into this space. Clara was a special education teacher for 32 years. She was a fierce advocate within an educational system that didn't always value her and certainly did not value the children and families she worked with. And she really modeled how to take care of people and how to extend care and how to extend care in a communal way. So my orientation to the world is that I'm always in community, not as an individual, even though I create things as an individual or what might seem like that. I'm still in communion with ancestors and honeybees and elemental energies to allow healing medicine to flow through me. So as I think about superheroes or archetypes, I'm thinking about the primordial mother and that maternal quality, regardless of gender or gender identity, this maternal quality of caregiving, of truth, of ferocity when needed, of an embrace when that's the medicine that needs to come forth. And the other archetype, there are many in this chapter. My middle name is Cassandra. So I included Cassandra in chapter 4 of this upcoming book. And, she was a truth teller and was gifted the gift of prophecy, and she could see the future. And I feel like given my different practices and really just how I came in and the cosmic makeup of who I am and the ancestral makeup of who I am, that I deeply align with Cassandra and being able to tap into intuition and what might unfold in the future. And certainly as a truth teller to say, this is my truth. I'm not saying it's the universal truth, but bringing that truth forth to invite change and transformation and alchemy and healing for others and within community. So there are more, but those are the two that are bubbling up now, this prophetess and truth teller and the primordial mother.
Beautiful. I just want to say thank you for naming. I think so often, and I think it's recency bias, right? We get into this space where like a lot of these practices are, which it's a great thing, right? A lot of our practices are sort of emerging into the mainstream and they're getting popularized. We're seeing like sound healing, Reiki, we're seeing yoga like on TV, right? Like folks are talking about it more. And so sometimes there can be this sense that like there's a new wave of healing at the moment. And, maybe there's some truth to that. But also, I love that you named that I saw this. It just looked different, right? Like knowing what caregiving and healing looked like for generations before us. It might not have, they might not have rolled out a fancy yoga mat, but there were care practices and healing practices that were in play. And I just appreciate you naming and bringing that to the forefront because it's something I had to do when I thought about it. I'm like, where did this healing thing come from for me? I'm like, I know it didn't just start with me. And I think back to my mom who did a lot of work working with folks who, had different abilities in their bodies and folks who experienced sort of different ailments as they grew up. And I remember I grew up around that and noticing the care in which she displayed for folks that she worked with or was able to sort of share as a caregiver. And I was like, oh, my mom has been doing this. It just looked different.
Yes.
She didn't name it as like, I'm a healer in this world, but that's what her day-to-day job was.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for bringing that in, your mother and what you witnessed and what was modeled to you, because we're part of a lineage of healers and healing. Many people are, and I appreciate what you named about the form and shape it might take. That, it might look shiny and new, and yet it's rooted in ancient technologies and traditions and
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah. And I think that takes me to my next question because and I just did a presentation for at work just around this whole idea of self-care and like how do we bridge this into, our professional work. And I got a real interesting question of like, well, sometimes it feels like this idea of self-care doesn't feel fair because it doesn't factor in something bigger. And I was like, that is absolutely it. And I was like, you looking ahead of my presentation. Hold on for a second. But can you talk a little bit about, this idea of like collective healing and maybe the link that's missing right now around like connecting the dot from self-care to like collective care? Because I feel like as I was reading the book, The Wisdom of the Hive, folks, if y'all ain't got it yet,
Thank
do
you.
yourself a favor. But it was a reminder of like we're a part of something bigger, and I think sometimes the way self care is framed, it's very individualized. So can you talk a little bit about maybe that linkage and how that's emerged for you?
Yeah. I'm thinking about the industry, the wellness industry, even metaphysical industry when we put capitalism in business with these ancient technologies and practices and then commodify them and sell them in the name of self-care, which actually I think upholds this idea of individualism instead of collectivism. Um, and that, it's just about my personal gain, how I can benefit from an asana practice or a meditation or a sound healing practice or Reiki, whatever healing modalities people are drawn to, that it's sold to us because of the system of capitalism as if it's just about us. And that's not what it was never just about an individual. Like none of these practices, if I think about Reiki, that is about healing, maybe an ailment that lives within me, but it's likely that it lives within someone else and it's energy. It's working with energy. It's moving energy, which is universal and within everyone. And so I think it's fascinating, not surprising, but fascinating how capitalism will commodify and just uphold this more is better and it's just about you and you're not in community and you're not tethered in this way or interconnected, which is the opposite of how honeybees actually operate. If we bring in the wisdom of the hive, they are a super organism and an individual bee. I'm not a honeybee, so I don't know. And yet, what I have observed and learned from my direct relationship with bees and spiritual connection with bees and the more than human world at large is that an individual bee doesn't see themselves as an individual. They experience themselves as a part of a larger hive and collective. And so when we think about self and collective care, I think about the honeybees a lot because nothing they do is separate from the collective. All of it is to benefit the collective. So there may be individual practices like body work that I get or energy work that is for me and to regulate my nervous system. And there's going to be an impact if I have a regulated or dysregulated nervous system. That will affect the collective, my community, people I'm in relationship with. And so to me, self and collective care are intertwined. And I don't know how to see them as separate because I think what we do for ourselves to find center, to ground, to heal, whatever words people might want to use or however they might describe this, that is not in isolation because we are not in isolation. We are part of that hive, right? We are part of that larger collective now, right? In real time, this conversation. And I think about the past and lineage and also the future as well.
Mm. I'm gonna come back to that because I want to circle to another question and then come back. But I always love to ask authors, especially for someone like you, who's again, you mentioned you got another book cooking. Um,
Yes.
what was it that I guess what came up for you that made you realize that it was time for this book to be birthed? Like, what felt like this message was resonant at this moment of time?
This is such an interesting question because for many authors, whether you self-publish or work with a publisher, it can be a long process. And so when you start working on the project, it might be a year before it comes out. And this is definitely true. If you work with a publishing company, it will take a year from the time you turn in your submission, the manuscript, for the book to come out, right? And so when I think about timing, it's fascinating because I'm thinking back to when this project bubbled up inside me, and I talked to my best friend Amy, who co-wrote it with me. We went to this nature-based shamanism program in 2023, although I was aware of it and many of the practices that we share in the book prior to that program. And I remember I went there with the intention of learning and leaning in and being open. And I remember while we were there, we started talking about this book, like, we need to do this. So that was 2 years ago. And then, there was a process of working on a proposal and doing ritual and ceremony, which we did around what messages and themes we wanted to come through. And we did know that an election in the US would happen before the book emerged. Of course, well, I kind of had feelings and thoughts about how that would go, but I didn't know until I knew, right? But I sort of paid attention to the collective and felt into it, as Cassandra does, and sort of knew and saw the writing on the wall. And I was like, either way, this book, there'll be right timing around it when it comes out. It came out on World Bee Day, which no one planned or knew at the time. Came out on May 20th, which the bees planned. I shouldn't say no one, the bees knew. And so I feel like this message of collective healing, it's a theme in all of my books and the way that I work and my offerings. And it just felt like this is the time to help people through their understanding of all of the ways. And there's 3 chapters about the sting. All of the ways are being stung into wakefulness. This is the time to bring that up. And then also the sweetness that's in there too, that exists even amid the unraveling that is happening around us. That's not new, but the intensity to me feels different. And to call people into this collective consciousness and unity consciousness that bees embody. 10 years ago, I think we could have written this, but no, right now is the time, because I think people are waking up to all the things that are in the way of that unity consciousness. Now, some of us have known and felt into you and been like, I'm just going to write it in a different way and tell y'all, like, we actually need to be in circle and ceremony with one another if we're going to heal. We need to remember we are each other's relations and kin, like, and interconnected. And this specific story from the bees, I feel like the timing is right now because so many of us are reconnecting with the more than human world and the lessons we can learn from not only bees, but trees and how they send medicine and healing through their roots, and bodies of water, and all of the ways the multiverse heals and is mirroring ways that we can heal too. So, and, the bees told me, I think the bees were like, now, do it now. Now's the time. What are you waiting for? They were my co-writers for this book, in addition to Amy, for sure. And they channeled messages through me. That's how it worked with this project, many projects, but this project in particular. I could feel the messages move through me that they wanted to come through in the book.
Nice. That actually takes me to my next question, right? You mentioned sort of getting still, finding ritual that sort of helped the refinement or just even the remembrance of the message for the book. What tips do you have for folks who are looking to lean in? Because I do think that the world is asking for us to connect to that natural world or that unseen world that I think things are asking for us to listen in a more intentional way. And so maybe what tips do you have for folks who are maybe awakening a little bit more, maybe ready to lean in a little bit more to hear what's there?
Yeah, I think in whatever way people can rest and get still, um, and that takes different forms, and quiet or solitude. Listening feels like a big piece of this. And for me, and it may be different for other people, I'm sure it is, um, quietness and tuning in to the more than human world through that quietness or seeking solitude, and it allows me to receive messages from it. Like I notice different things. For example, when I go on a walk and I don't listen to a podcast, and I do this in the morning most of the time. I don't listen to anything except the soundtrack within the more than human world, which is full, like the dragonflies and the bird song and the crows talk to me every morning. And, there are people I might pass who say hello. They're part of that soundtrack too, or the dogs that they're walking as I walk Jasper, or the trees rustling in the wind, or the water. There's a lake in my neighborhood, or the geese. I mean, there's just so much energy there and material there to be in connection with. So I think, if I stop talking and get quiet, there's so much that is revealed to me. So I would, whatever form that takes for people, it could be meditation, it could be walking meditation, it could be movement, and at least turning inward enough to turn down the volume of the world, which when I say that, in contrast to the more than human world, what I mean is like humanity and what we're doing to each other, and the noise and the headlines and the social media and all of the things that want to distract us, or want us to doom scroll, or want us to be in despair. Or I think that takes up so much psychic space that it's difficult to turn within to say, well, what's true for me now? How do I feel? What do I notice or observe that's around me? What exists beyond, in addition to the headlines and the despair and the unraveling or destruction, right? What's being birthed or born? Or so that's some about what I practice and what I'd invite people to do. Maybe it's through journaling that people do that. It's 5 minutes of journaling, or listening to the sound of their breath, even to connect to center and intuition, or listening to a song, right? But whatever that is that brings people back. So we don't think we are the chaos. Like, I don't think I'm the chaos, or that we are the chaos. I contribute to chaos at times. I can come at you sideways. I'm human. I do all sorts of things in relationship to others. And I don't believe that's the whole of who we are, or even true to our nature, right? And who we are.
I love that. I love that. And it actually just sort of, again, the flow. I love it. Because I was going to ask you, I know you mentioned earlier in terms of the structure of the book, and sort of mentioning these ideas of like how we're being stung into awakening, and then also sort of balancing like the sweetness of the honey. Why was it important to like balance the structure around sort of like the things that might feel a little uncomfortable, or might be filling us with a little discomfort or pain in that way, but then also balancing out like the sweetness of the message too? I love that you brought it, because I think quite often, even when I first like picked up the book and I thought about it, I'm like, bees. In my mind, I'm immediately kind of like, I was like, in my mind, the bees, it's a little scary, a little dicey with bees. I think about being stung, like, like growing up and those sort of things, and what that sort of brings to the aversion to sort of bees when I'm out in nature and I like might hear or see the bees, where I'm like, ooh, let me duck around. But I love the idea of like also centering, like there's wisdom in that, but then also there's the sweetness there too. Can you talk a little bit about like maybe the structure and why you wanted to balance that?
Yeah, I love this question. And a lot of people feel afraid of parts of the more than human world, in particular beings that can sting us, physically sting us. So, and some of us are allergic to bees. So I just want to name that's a real thing. And there's a healthy fear we might have. I also think sometimes this fear is about a fear of the unknown. Honeybees, I said earlier, I'm not a honeybee. So I am relating to a species and trying to translate the way they communicate, which is vastly different than the way that I communicate, even though some of the practices are the same. And there's an entire chapter about attunement in there. Humans do that all the time through, you know, this through sound, through humming, which is one of the ways we introduced it in the book, which is what bees do, through pheromones, which is humans do, and bees do through movement, through dance. Sometimes species that we interact with feel we're afraid because we don't understand them. And if we don't understand why they might sting us, which I just want to clarify that often honeybees give you warning signals unless they feel very threatened as a collective. And they do this because when they sting you, they die, except for the queen. And so often honeybees, if you have something sweet in your hand, they're going to be curious. They're going to come over. If it's a wild hive in a tree, right, they might be a little spicy or maybe not. It sort of depends where it's located and how many people are passing by. And, you know, humans are not always respectful of the more than human world. So, and many things have happened to bees throughout history, the way they've been used. They've been used in warfare. Like their sting has been used in this way that is horrific. And I believe on some level they have an awareness of that, just like we have an awareness of ancestral trauma in our body. I think the collective hive body understands it as well. So, you know, bees are curious, and they might come up to us and look at us and buzz and fly back and forth if we have something sweet. But typically they're doing the work that they need to do to support the hive. And for us, it was important and true to form, I would say, as I think about myself and as I think about Amy, I wrote the chapters about the sting and about inflammation and about wakefulness through being stung based on the truths that are being exposed to us or that we're waking up to. We co-wrote the chapter on sweetness, but it's so resonant of our relationship with one another and just how we share our medicine. There's a chapter about medicine, how we share our medicine in the world. And we could have written a book about just sweetness, but given the intention of this book, which is about collective well-being and what we can learn from the more than human world through the laboratory and lens of a honeybee hive, felt important to be like, the sting is actually alchemical. You know, it actually, your body responds to a sting unless you're allergic, but even then it does. But if you're not, your body responds to a sting and jumps into action, your immune system to heal. And there's inflammation that happens. There's a memory of that sting for a little while, and then it heals. If your system is working in the way it's designed to, and there are things that get in the way in that, it will heal. And I think sometimes we forget when we're stung into wakefulness that the purpose of that and intention, and this is why I speak truth in the way I do, is for healing. I'm not just going to try to like sting people. That's purpose. Like that's not what I'm not here for that. There's an intention behind that to say, do you see this too? Do you feel this? Right? Are you aware of this? How's it landing in your body? How are you participating in this? How am I participating in it? Because I think that's the way we alchemize and transmute the chaos. Is we can't bypass the sting though. Like it's all around us if we feel into what's happening right now, what has happened historically and what is happening now.
I'm just sitting with you said we can't bypass the sting. Yeah, that one's sitting in my spirit.
You're like, what? How do you feel about it? What do you think?
You know, I love that because I feel like it's one, it actually made me think about my biases towards, and my bias towards bees. And to your point, you're like, they actually not even thinking, they really minding their own business. They got their own things to do. And we just sitting here like darting across the street, trying to run away, moving all over the place from them. And it actually sort of made me think about my bias around that and how often we sort of, for something like we think about bias on a larger scale when we think about like people that we're engaging, but it's like, well, that behavior is also replicated in other ways, right? And how we're connecting to nature. And in reality, nature has its own systems. Nature, you know, we think that the bee that we see is just out to get me, when in reality, it has its own system. It has its own role to play. It is, again, going back to its own sort of collective need and healing. And
Mm-hmm.
how am I intruding in that or making myself the center of the world when in reality that bee ain't thinking about me? Now, if I'm in its business and doing something, then rightfully so. But in reality, that bee has its own whole life, its own whole system, its own whole community to pour back into, which I feel like there's a message in that like for me I'm sitting with at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, you're making me think about my friend Stephanie Ghost and Paul, who um, she talks about minding your business. She's like, "Are you minding your business?" And she means all sorts of things with that. Like, are you minding your business? And also, we are in connection. You know, we are in relationship. We are each other's bond, right? And so I think I love that. Because I feel like that's such important medicine. Sometimes I don't mind my business and then I get into mess, right? It's like, but if I'm minding my business well, I understand I'm in relationship with other folks and I'm like doing my part to support the collective, to be of service, whatever form and shape that takes. And trusting that too. And also trusting other folks are doing that I'm in community with, which is a whole other
Exactly.
podcast. But yes.
Listen. I'm like, woo, woo. Yeah. No, I'm absolutely with you there. That's where our mind is going because I'm like, wow. Like to your point, minding your business. And it's funny, I say that all the time. I'm like, you know how different the world would be if everybody was just minding their business and doing what their, God given, spirit given, whatever their sort of mission, purpose, vision is. The world would look so different. But I feel like the friction that we always get is it's just folk. If you boil it down, it's folks minding other people's business. And
Yes.
it's like, what would it look like to mind your business and focus in on the work that is, and I always think about when I talk about like purpose driven work, it's like the work that is contributing to the larger collective. And like if we were just focused on that, things would look so different. But yeah, I'm thinking
That's
about
right.
like, and I want to go for a walk now and then go like, let me go see what the bees are doing and just watching and observing. There's something to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely, there is. I love that. I love that we went there because, yeah, can just shift our way of thinking, being, feeling, and connection.
Yeah. One of the questions I would ask you again, and as I know I mentioned it earlier, but like, I feel like it's legit serious. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of yoga teacher trainings and just trainings in general. And I always feel like when I look at the syllabus or I look at a book reading list, like skill and action is always there. Your books are there. And it's, I think that's intentional. And it's I would ask, knowing that the work that you do, the resources that you create, the wisdom that you pour into the world is pretty much a staple as practitioners are growing or developing. Um, you know, what advice would you give to folks who are on their practitioner or like space holding journey that you feel is like
Hmm.
really relevant at the moment?
Yeah, I think um, it's in some way related to what we just talked about minding our business in the sense of like, what is my ministry? And
Mm,
so, or what is your ministry? And you know what I mean when I say that, I mean, what is our work? What is our medicine? What is our offering? What is our gift? Um, and how do we carry that? And how do we offer it? And how do we allow it to evolve? So I would invite people to think about that because particularly within and I am developing, right? I just took this training with you. It's not like I'm on a constant journey as a student and learner. I want to name that for people. And I have some wisdom to share, and what I learn enhances that wisdom. So there's an openness. I don't think I'm going to arrive somewhere and know all the things that I need to know or finish an experience, an immersion, a training, whatever we want to call it, and think I know everything about this. Often these immersions deepen my curiosity and I want to learn more. So I would invite people into that energy, the spirit of that curiosity and this ongoing learning process. And what does it mean to be a leader, a teacher, a space holder, and a student? And where do we learn? And what do we need in those learning spaces? And how to ask questions about that or feel into that through intuition. That's one thing I would say. that feels related to minding our business and tending um, to ourselves. And the other thing is, I think what's connected to what I just named is that sometimes in immersions, people, I say this all the time in trainings, I tell people I will share what I know and the wisdom I have learned from many other teachers and the wisdom that I think I came in with. And I don't want to create 15 Michelle Johnsons. You know, like that's not the point of this. And I think sometimes, particularly because of the teacher student dynamic, people can be like, Michelle is saying do it this way, when I'm just saying here's some information. How does that sit with you? How can you take these teachings and then think about how to offer them authentically from your own being? What words would you use? This is how I teach all the time, because I'm thinking about cookie cutters. Like, I'm not trying to replicate, that same shape, that same teacher, that same, even though there are principles I offer through skill and action and values and questions, I want people to think about how can I live into these teachings from my being, not from Michelle's voice, right? Not exactly in the same way. So I feel like it's important for us and people as practitioners to know that, and to really continue to ask that question. And then the other piece is about, like, how can I share this authentically? And the other piece is this book about sustaining and protecting our energy. Anyone who's holding any kind of healing space in groups, one-to-one, with the earth, with people, with the ancestors, whatever people are doing with elemental energies, they need some, especially now, because the field, there's so much going on in the energetic field and in the relative plane, that we have to have practices that protect our energy, our channel, our vessel. I just think people think I'm going to offer all these things to other folks and not ever tend to this channel. It's not going to work. You'll burn out, you'll get adrenal fatigue, you won't feel interested anymore. A lot of things happen as a result of that. And so I feel like people have to have some practices to come back to themselves, and really specifically protection. Because if we're doing what, people call as light work, or we're doing work in service of the collective and aligned with the highest good, there's some vampiric, malevolent beings, energies out there coming for us. We're even more vulnerable. We're even more vulnerable than someone who's not sure of that they're in a body and that they have a ministry, right? Those of us who are clear about it and we're out loud about it, those vampiric energies are coming for us. I know this from experience. It happens to the body, it happens to the psyche, happens to the spirit. And if we don't have protection practices, we leave ourselves wide open for those attacks, which those things make it much more difficult for us to do what we're meant to do. So I know that was a whole sermon and word, but I feel really strongly about all of it.
I know it was a word because I got the shivers when you said that. And I'm like, I haven't heard anybody name it. I'm excited to keep powering through the wisdom of the Hive. Again, I think I mentioned prior to us starting that this has been my morning read when I sit with tea. So I'm slowly going into it because there's an intentionality. I want to sit with this. And the fact that you mentioned that there's something cooking around protection is this energy around collective healing is so important that we need to bring this message, because again, to your point, capitalism is disrupting the ways in which we're looking at connection and community, and intentionally, right? Stuff is engineered.
Absolutely.
And also that feels like the evolution. It's as we start getting tighter in community, how do we now protect that? Because I think that there's also this there's an intentional chipping away at the community building that I think is happening, especially where we are politically, that we see there's some successful grouping together, even though we're engineering y'all not to be able to connect, we got to chip away at it. And I love this idea of naming that there's some vampiric energies out there that are designed to just suck up the energy. And I see our folks out here, trying to do their work, but doing it from a depleted space. And it's like the intention behind it is wanting to still be out, and because I know there's so many folks, so many healers and practitioners that are clear about what they are designed to do.
Yeah.
They got some vampires and leeches that are sucking that energy, and it's difficult. It's difficult. So yeah, I'm excited for that. That is, a much needed conversation in the community.
It definitely, it is for sure. And one part of that book is this energy assessment. And I think about, Duke Power sends me a bill every month to show me how much energy I've used. And they also send a thing that's like, you could actually decrease the amount of energy you use. If we think about power, it's better for the earth if I actually use less energy in that way. But it became this part of the book because I was like, I do believe we are infinite beings, our spirits, our souls, and also I'm in a body and have a limited amount of energy that can actually move through and from this body, this house that I live in, right? This vessel. And so I love this idea of like assessing, how much energy am I using and how am I expending it and where am I placing it? And what may have attached to me that I'm unaware of, right? That I can actually work to release. And I think the assumption should be that if you're doing any healing work, that there is a counter energy, a polarity to that will try to disrupt you. I'm not saying that to scare people. I'm just saying, look at the political, social, cultural context. Just feel into that, and then you will know that there are vampiric energies and malevolent beings coming for those of us who are, as you said, trying to build community during a time when communities, families, people are being fragmented and split apart, like intentionally and in ways and at a pace, I guess I should say. Not the ways are not new, but the pace feels different to me of this rupture of community. It feels severe. I've never seen anything like this or experienced anything like this. So if we make the assumption that if we're elevating a practice of collective care and community building, if we make the assumption that there's going to be some disruption to that, what does that call us into as far as how we use our energy and where we place it?
Oof. Yeah, I feel the chills. I still feel the chills. I'm excited for that. I'm like, yes, y'all, that's on the horizon. And the wisdom of the hive is here now. For those folks that are listening, that I'm sure are, I was going to say go to Amazon to order your book, but I would like to say go to your local bookstore and purchase your book and get your book that way. But for those folks who are about to go out and grab it or already have it and are working through it, as we start to like close our conversation, what are you hoping people take away from the connection to this book and sort of the message that you and Amy have designed to share, or even just channeled? As you mentioned, like really listening to the bees and allowing this to be birthed that way. What are you hoping that resonates with folks as they connect with this book?
Yeah. Well, we've mentioned some of the different themes in the book, with the overarching theme being about collective well-being. And there are meditations and poems and practices. So I hope people practice, that one or two or five of the practices or a reflection question speaks to them and stirs, right? Gives them the chills, stirs something within them in the spirit of transformation and change. I think the other intention is for us to connect more deeply to the more than human world and be reverent students of it and observers of it and in connection to it, and to come back into the awareness of our connection to the bees and beyond. And, there's such an extractive relationship people can have with the earth and the more than human world. So what does it mean? And I actually do this with my hives, for me to go sit at the foot of the hive and just listen, right? Or just watch the way they work. People can do this with a grove of trees or a river or the mycelial network. There's ghost pipe that's blooming right outside of this door, right? Like people can do it which are not actually mushrooms, I should say, but they look like mushrooms. And ghost pipe is a really powerful medicine that I work with. And so just whatever that is for people, right? To find that place where one can be a student, an observer, listen, get quiet and still in the way we talked about earlier. And, you know, the intention is to deepen relation through this book is to deepen relationship with self. And also with the world at large, right? This beautiful ecosystem that we get to be a part of now in these physical forms and incarnations that we have been a part of because we're breathing breath that was present hundreds of years ago, and also into the future. And so I want people to think about not only collective well-being now, or those technologies we can pull from lineage and the past, but also our offering and sweetness for the future. I would like to leave the planet in a better place. That's not coming from an ego place. I would just like my ministry in some way, maybe in the small corner of my world, or maybe it's more vast than that, to leave this planet in a better place than it is now for the future. And bees teach us this because they work for a future that they may not see in physical form. They live for such a short amount of time. They live for 6 to 8 weeks, except the queen and winter bees, but it's a very short lifespan, particularly in the time of expansion, spring and summer. And yet they labor for the future and for like those future generations of eggs that will be laid and babies, and they offer pollen. You know, that every time sort of just makes my whole body and spirit move, because I think about what does it mean to labor for a future we may not see, but to do it anyway.
If there was ever a mic drop moment, that was it. Michelle, thank you so much for being in conversation today. This, my listeners probably roll their eyes every time I say this, but I'm like, every time, again, and I know that's divine design. Every time I'm in conversation with a guest on the podcast, there's something that they share that is like deeply resonant in the moment of my life. And so thank you, because a lot of this conversation was that. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you. And how can folks get in contact with you? What you got, any, you know, other than the fact that The Wisdom of the Hive is out, we got another book on the horizon. What else is cooking in your world, and how can folks get in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you, Shawn, again, for being in community and conversation, for being one of my teachers, for the magic medicine sweetness you offer in the world, the care that you offer in community, and the way you cultivate community. So thank you, thank you, thank you for your genius and your brilliance. And people can find me on my website, which is michellecjohnson.com. That's updated pretty frequently because there are in-person and online offerings, some short workshops, some long-form trainings that I do all of the time. So people can find me there. They can find all my books there as well. And there's some resources that go along with some of the books, like a 40-day sadhana for finding refuge, or I'm leading a book, series based on A Space for Us, which is a book about how to lead affinity groups for people of the global majority, Black, Indigenous people of color. That starts in September, so people can find the book there and then sign up if they're interested. There's for The Wisdom of the Hive, a honeybee inspired playlist and some audio versions of the meditations from the book, which I wanted to let people know it's on Audible, and Amy and I read it. And so, you know, if people want to connect that way, it's the authors, actually, which is rare. We got to read the book. And if people want to connect that way. And then the other place to find me is on social media, on Instagram. I post somewhat regularly at Skill in Action is my handle for Skill in Action. And I post what's coming up, but also pictures of Jasper, my dog, and my garden and the bees. And so you get a glimpse into my life in that way. And Skill in Action is going to have a we're doing it's not a Skill in Action 2.0. It's like we don't know the name yet, but there's going to be this launch that happens in the fall with Skill in Action, with some new offerings from it, which we're excited about, and a platform with resources and a way to build community and to practice together. So people can stay tuned for that too.
Okay. All right. That is exciting. For those that are listening on a podcast platform, click down in the show notes. All the contact information will be listed there. If you're watching on YouTube, click down in the description as well. You can click those links right there. Michelle, thank you. This has been a pleasure. And yeah, it's just, it's magical being in community with you, as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Same. Thanks again. Thank you so much for who you are.
Hey Rebels, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Mindful Rebel podcast. Remember, after this listen, ask yourself where wisdom can meet practice and where compassion can meet action. Take a moment today to reflect on what resonated with you in this episode. Now, if you're feeling that rebel spirit, I'd invite you to like and share this episode. Your support helps spread the message of mindfulness, self-inquiry, and self-discovery. And if you're feeling extra generous, and I know you are, leave a rating and a review of the podcast. It helps others find this resource on their own mindfulness journey. May you move into the rest of your day with a greater sense of peace, clarity, and freedom.